The text message from my dad was short and brutal. Had a nice chat with Ryan. Glad someone finally sees your potential, even if I still think you're wasting it. I stared at my phone screen in the FBI field office break room, my coffee growing cold as the implications sank in. Dad had met Ryan. My dad had talked to my boyfriend, who also happened to be my supervising agent, and somehow managed to insult me in the process. I'd been dreading this moment for months. When Ryan Martinez first asked me out 6 months ago, I'd made him promise to keep our relationship separate from work. It wasn't just about professionalism, though dating your boss definitely complicated things. It was about my family never understanding what I actually did for a living, and my terror that Ryan would see me through their eyes instead of his own. Agent Cooper? Ryan's voice made me jump. He was standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Can I see you in my office? The walk down the hallway felt like a death march. Ryan closed the door behind us and gestured for me to sit, but I remained standing, arms crossed defensively. So you met my dad, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I did. Ryan settled behind his desk, but his posture was relaxed rather than formal. Interesting man. Very. Opinionated. What exactly did he say about me being a loser? The words tumbled out before I could stop them. Because if you're having second thoughts about dating someone your agency never should have hired in the first place, let's just get it over with. Ryan's eyebrows shot up. Whoa, slow down. First of all, he didn't call you a loser. He said he was surprised someone finally recognized your potential, because he'd always thought you were spinning your wheels and settling for less than you're capable of. I blinked. That was actually worse somehow. So he thinks I'm an underachiever instead of a complete failure. How reassuring. Sarah, sit down, please. Ryan's voice had shifted into the gentle tone he used when he was trying to talk me down from one of my anxiety spirals. Your father is proud of you. He's just terrible at expressing it. You've known him for one conversation. I've known him for 28 years. I finally sank into the chair across from his desk. Trust me, proud isn't the word I'd use. Ryan leaned forward, his dark eyes serious. He told me you have a master's degree in criminal psychology that you're wasting on field work instead of using for something more respectable, like private practice therapy. He said you've always been brilliant, but stubborn, and that you chose this job to prove something to people who don't matter, instead of doing something that would actually utilize your education. Each word felt like a small knife. This was exactly why I'd never wanted Ryan to meet my family. Dad had a talent for making my achievements sound like character flaws, my choices like acts of rebellion rather than career decisions. The thing is, Ryan continued, he's completely wrong about why I hired you, and he's completely wrong about what you're capable of. Ryan, you don't have to. I hired you because you were the most qualified candidate we interviewed. Your psychological training gives you insights into criminal behavior that most agents take years to develop. Your fieldwork is exceptional because you understand people, both victims and perpetrators, in ways that pure law enforcement training doesn't teach. He paused, his expression softening. I asked you out because you're brilliant, passionate, and fearless. Your father's opinion of your career choices doesn't change any of that. I felt tears pricking at my eyes, which was mortifying. You don't understand what it's like growing up as a disappointment. Dad wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer, or marry someone respectable and have babies. Instead, I became a federal agent who carries a gun and chases criminals for a living. And he met me at a family barbecue, Ryan said quietly. My stomach dropped. Oh God, what happened? Ryan's mouth twitched in what might have been suppressed amusement. Your sister invited me. Apparently she got tired of you making excuses for why I couldn't come to family events. She told your parents I was your serious boyfriend and that it was time we all met. Rebecca, my meddling older sister who'd been happily married to her college sweetheart for 5 years and couldn't understand why I was so secretive about my relationship. She thought family meetings were normal, healthy milestones instead of potential disasters. She ambushed you, I realized. I'm so sorry. I know I should have warned you about my family, but you were afraid I'd see you differently afterward. Ryan's voice was understanding rather than accusatory. Sarah, I've read your personnel file. I know your background. I know your father is Dr. James Cooper, one of the most prominent cardiothoracic surgeons in the state. I know your mother is Margaret Cooper, who sits on half the charity boards in the city. I know your sister is married to a successful attorney and they live in a house that costs more than most people make in a decade. I stared at him. You investigated my family? Standard background check for security clearance. But that's not why I know who they are. Ryan leaned back in his chair. My mother is a nurse at Presbyterian Hospital. She's worked with your father for 15 years. I grew up hearing about Dr. Cooper and his brilliant daughters. The one who became a physician's assistant and married well, and the one who was too smart for her own good and couldn't settle on anything. The room felt like it was spinning. Your mom knows my dad? She was at your high school graduation. She's the one who told me years ago about Dr. Cooper's younger daughter, who kept changing majors and couldn't figure out what she wanted to do with her life. Ryan's smile was gentle. Imagine my surprise when Sarah Cooper walked into my office for a job interview. This was a nightmare. So you've been hearing about what a screw-up I am since before we even met. I've been hearing about how frustrated your father was that someone with your intellect and potential seemed to be drifting. Ryan stood up and came around the desk to perch on the edge in front of me. But when you walked into that interview, I didn't see someone who was drifting. I saw someone who'd found exactly what she was meant to do. My mom probably told your mom all about my experimental phase in college, and dropping out of the pre-med program and changing my major 3 times before settling on psychology. She mentioned that you took some time to figure out your path, Ryan acknowledged, but she also mentioned that once you did, you excelled at everything. Graduated summa cum laude, finished your master's degree in record time, and scored higher on the FBI entrance exam than anyone in your class. I looked up at him, seeing my boyfriend's face instead of my supervisor's for the first time since this conversation started. You really hired me because I was qualified? I hired you because you were the best candidate. I asked you out because I'd been trying to work up the courage for 3 months and finally decided life was too short to worry about workplace politics. His hand found mine. Your father's opinion of your choices doesn't factor into either of those decisions. The relief was overwhelming, but it was quickly replaced by embarrassment. God, this is so unprofessional. I'm having a meltdown in my supervisor's office because my daddy doesn't approve of my career. You're having a very human reaction to family criticism, which happens to everyone regardless of their profession or their relationship status. Ryan squeezed my hand. But since we're being unprofessional anyway, can I tell you about the rest of my conversation with your father? I groaned. Do I want to know? He asked me what my intentions were regarding his daughter. Please tell me you didn't actually answer that. I told him I intended to support your career, respect your independence, and love you for exactly who you are, rather than trying to change you into someone more convenient. Ryan's eyes crinkled at the corners. He said that was either the perfect answer or evidence that I don't really know you yet. Despite everything, I laughed. That sounds like Dad, suspicious of anyone who thinks I'm fine the way I am. Then he spent 20 minutes telling me about your childhood achievements and how proud he was of your academic success, followed by another 20 minutes complaining that you were using your psychology degree to play cops and robbers, instead of helping people with real therapeutic work. Wait, he bragged about me? That was unexpected. Extensively. He showed me photos from your college graduation, your FBI Academy graduation, and several news articles about cases you've worked on that he apparently keeps in his wallet. Ryan smiled. He's proud of you, Sarah. He's just confused about why you chose a career that puts you in danger when you could have chosen something safer that used the same skills. This was making my head spin. Dad kept news articles about my work. He carried photos of my FBI graduation. He's never said any of that to me. Probably because he's hoping if he expresses enough disapproval you'll quit and become a therapist. Ryan's thumb traced across my knuckles. But he also told me that you've always been stubborn about doing things your own way, and that trying to change your mind about something you're passionate about is like, quote, arguing with a brick wall that has a psychology degree. I couldn't help smiling at that description. He's not wrong about the stubborn part. He also asked if I thought you were happy. What did you say? I said you light up when you talk about work. That you're more passionate about this job than most people are about anything in their lives. That you found something that uses every aspect of your training and personality, and that you're incredible at it. Ryan paused. He said he'd never seen you light up when talking about anything before, so maybe I knew something he didn't. Tears were definitely threatening now. He said that? He did. And then he asked if I was planning to propose anytime soon. Because he wanted to make sure I understood that marrying you would mean accepting that your career comes first, and that you'd never be the type of wife who puts family obligations ahead of professional responsibilities. I stared at him. Dad said I put career first? He said it like it was a warning. I told him it was one of the things I admired most about you. Ryan's expression grew more serious. Sarah, your father loves you. He just doesn't understand why you chose a career that scares him. When he calls you a disappointment, he's not talking about your achievements. He's talking about his fear that something will happen to you. This was too much information to process. My father, who'd spent years criticizing my choices, apparently carried photos of my accomplishments and worried about my safety. My boyfriend, who I'd been terrified would see me as a disappointment, thought my career focus was admirable. Everything I'd believed about both relationships was apparently wrong. I need to call in sick for the rest of the day, I said suddenly. I need to go home and think about this. Already approved, Ryan said. I figured you might need some processing time after meeting went the way family meetings usually go. You mean disastrously? I mean with everyone saying things they meant differently than they sounded. Ryan stood up and helped me to my feet. For what it's worth, I think your family just wants to understand why you love something they can't relate to. Your dad spent 40 years saving lives in operating rooms. The idea of you chasing armed criminals probably feels unnecessarily dangerous to him. And you? Does it feel unnecessarily dangerous to you? Ryan considered this. Sometimes, but then I remember that you chose this career because you wanted to use your skills to help people, and that you're exceptionally good at it. I can't ask you to be someone different, just because dating you would be easier if you had a desk job. I looked up at him, this man who'd somehow managed to see me clearly despite my family's confusion and my own insecurities. I love you. I love you too, even though your father warned me that you have a tendency to overthink things, and that I should be prepared for you to create problems that don't actually exist. He knows me pretty well, I admitted. He does. He also said that once you commit to something, you're loyal to a fault, and that you'll work harder than anyone else to succeed at it. Ryan smiled. He wasn't trying to talk me out of dating you, Sarah. He was trying to make sure I understood what I was getting into. And do you? I understand that I'm dating someone brilliant, who chose a challenging career because she wanted to make a difference. I understand that your family loves you but doesn't always know how to show it. And I understand that you're going to need some time to adjust to the idea that people can be proud of you without agreeing with all your choices. He was right. The concept that Dad could disapprove of my career while still being proud of my success was something I'd never considered. I'd assumed his criticism meant disappointment, when it might have meant fear and confusion instead. Can I ask you something? I said as Ryan walked me to the door. Anything. When you first read my file and realized who I was, did you think about not hiring me? Ryan paused with his hand on the doorknob. For about 30 seconds. Not because of your qualifications, but because workplace relationships are complicated and I was already attracted to you based on your interview. But you hired me anyway. I hired you because turning down the best candidate for personal reasons would have been unprofessional and unfair to you. He opened the door. Asking you out 3 months later was the personal decision. No regrets? About hiring you? Never. You're the best agent on my team. Ryan's smile was soft. About dating you? Only that it took me 3 months to work up the courage. I stood on my tiptoes to kiss him, not caring that half the office could probably see us through his glass walls. Thank you for not letting my dad scare you off. Thank you for not letting your fears about your dad scare you off. Ryan kissed me back gently. Go home, process this, and call me if you need to talk through any more family revelations. The drive home gave me time to replay the conversation and try to separate what Dad had actually said from what I'd assumed he meant. Growing up, I'd interpreted his criticism as evidence that he thought I was fundamentally flawed. But maybe his frustration had been about watching me struggle to find my path. not about disappointment in who I was as a person. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. Rebecca's name flashed on the screen. "Before you yell at me," she said as soon as I answered, "I think the barbecue went really well. You ambushed my boyfriend with our parents." "I introduced your boyfriend to our family. There's a difference." Rebecca sounded completely unrepentant. "And he handled Dad beautifully. I was impressed." Dad told him I was a disappointment. Dad told him he was worried about you and confused by your career choice, which is not the same thing. Rebecca's voice gentled. "Sarah, you've been dating this man for 6 months and avoiding bringing him around because you were convinced we'd all hate him or he'd decide you weren't worth the family drama. But he fits in perfectly, and Dad actually likes him." Dad likes him? Dad respects him. After Ryan left, Dad spent an hour talking about how that young man clearly understood you better than Dad thought anyone could. Rebecca paused. "He also said maybe he'd been wrong about your career if it attracted the kind of man who could appreciate your strengths instead of trying to fix your weaknesses." I sat in my car, phone pressed to my ear, trying to process this new information. "Dad said that?" "He did. And Mom wants to invite you both for dinner next Sunday so she can properly embarrass you with baby pictures and interrogate Ryan about his family background." "Oh God." "It's a good thing, Sarah. It means they're taking the relationship seriously and want to get to know him better." Rebecca's tone turned more serious. "Look, I know Dad has never been great at expressing pride or approval. But he's been carrying around newspaper clippings about your cases for years. He just didn't know how to tell you he was proud without also expressing his worry about your safety." Ryan said the same thing. "Because it's true. Dad loves you. He's proud of you. And he's terrified something will happen to you because he doesn't understand how dangerous your job actually is." Rebecca sighed. "He thinks being an FBI agent means you're constantly in shootouts and car chases like in the movies. Most of my job is paperwork and interviews." "We know that. Dad doesn't. He sees the news stories about agents getting hurt and assumes that's your daily reality." After I hung up with Rebecca, I sat in my driveway for another 20 minutes, trying to recalibrate my understanding of my family relationships. Dad wasn't disappointed in me. He was scared for me. Mom wasn't ashamed of my career. She just didn't understand it. Rebecca wasn't trying to interfere. She was trying to bridge the gap between what I thought my family felt and what they actually felt. And Ryan hadn't been hired because of pity or family connections or anything other than my qualifications. He hadn't asked me out despite my family baggage. He'd asked me out because he saw me clearly enough to love both my strengths and my complications. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. "Your young man seems very intelligent. Dinner Sunday at 6. Your mother is making her pot roast." I stared at the message. Dad never texted. He barely knew how to use his phone for anything beyond actual phone calls. But he'd figured out how to send me an invitation to family dinner that included my boyfriend. I texted back, "We'll be there." His response came immediately. "Good, bring your commendations. I want to show Ryan the ones I missed." My eyes filled with tears as I realized what that meant. Dad had been following my career closely enough to know there were commendations he hadn't seen yet. He'd been proud of my achievements, even while criticizing my choices. Inside my apartment, I called Ryan. "How's the processing going?" he answered. "I think I owe you an apology," I said. "And my family might not be as bad as I made them sound." "They're not bad at all. They're just worried about you and trying to figure out how to support a career they don't understand. Dad wants us to come to dinner Sunday. He wants to show you my commendations." Ryan's chuckle was warm. "I'd love to see them. And meet your mother properly, since I only got to say hello yesterday before your father monopolized the conversation." "You're really okay with this? With dating someone whose family thinks her career is questionable, and who apparently overthinks everything?" "Sarah, I'm dating someone whose family loves her enough to worry about her safety, and who cares enough about her work to question whether she's making the right choices." "That's not a red flag. That's evidence that you come from people who love you, even if they don't always know how to show it." "What about the overthinking part?" "I find your analytical nature charming, most of the time." Ryan's tone turned teasing. "Though if you could try not to create any more imaginary relationship crises this week, I'd appreciate it." I have actual crimes to solve. I make no promises about the overthinking, but I'll try to limit the relationship paranoia. That's all I ask. Now go do whatever it is you do when you're processing family revelations. I'll see you tomorrow. After I hung up, I realized I should probably call Mom to confirm Sunday dinner plans and apologize for springing Ryan on them without warning. But first, I wanted to sit with this new understanding of my place in my family and my relationship. For years, I'd been operating under the assumption that my parents disapproved of my choices, and that any romantic partner would eventually see me through their eyes and find me lacking. But Ryan had met my parents and somehow managed to see past their worry to their love, past their criticism to their pride. Maybe the problem hadn't been my family's attitude toward me. Maybe the problem had been my assumption that love and concern had to look the same as approval and understanding. Dad could be proud of my achievements while still wishing I'd chosen a safer career. Mom could love me while still not quite understanding why I wanted to carry a gun and chase criminals. And Ryan could love me. Career complications, family drama, and overthinking tendencies included, because he saw those things as part of who I was rather than obstacles to overcome. Sunday dinner was going to be interesting, but for the first time in months, I was looking forward to it instead of dreading it. My family might never fully understand my career choices, but they loved me enough to try, and Ryan loved me enough to appreciate both my strengths and my quirks. That felt like enough, more than enough, actually. It felt like the foundation for something real and lasting, built on truth instead of fear, and acceptance instead of judgment. I was still a federal agent who carried a gun and chased criminals for a living. Dad was still going to worry about my safety. Mom was still going to ask when I was planning to settle down and have children. Rebecca was still going to meddle in my personal life. But now I understood that all of that came from love rather than disappointment. And Ryan understood it too, which meant I didn't have to choose between my family and my relationship, or between my career and my personal life. For the first time in years, everything felt like it was falling into place, even if that place was more complicated than I'd originally planned. For the first time in years, everything felt like it was falling into place, even if that place was more complicated than I'd originally planned. The rest of the week passed in a strange mixture of normalcy and anticipation. At work, Ryan and I maintained our professional boundaries during the day, but I caught him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read during team meetings. It wasn't until Friday afternoon that I realized what I was seeing: relief. He'd been just as worried about the family meeting as I had been, just better at hiding it. "Agent Cooper, can you stay after the briefing?" he asked as the team filed out of the conference room after our weekly case review. When we were alone, he closed the door and leaned against it. "How are you feeling about Sunday?" "Terrified but optimistic," I offered. "Mom called 3 times this week to confirm dietary restrictions and ask about your family background. She's treating this like a state dinner." Ryan laughed. "My mother does the same thing when I bring someone home. She once rearranged the entire living room because she thought the furniture placement would make a bad first impression. Please tell me you've warned your family about mine. I've prepared them for the possibility that your father might interview me like I'm applying for security clearance, and that your mother will probably ask about my long-term intentions before we finish the appetizer course." The fact that Ryan was already thinking about introducing me to his family made something warm unfurl in my chest. "You want me to meet your parents?" "Eventually, if you're ready for that." His expression grew more serious. "Sarah, I know this week has been a lot. Finding out that your family's feelings about your career are different than you thought, realizing that I've known about your background longer than you knew, that's a lot of information to process. Are you worried I'm going to overthink us into oblivion? I'm worried you might feel like I had some kind of unfair advantage, knowing about your family situation before you told me about it." Ryan moved closer, his voice gentle. "I want to make sure you understand that I never discussed you with my mother, and I never made any professional decisions based on information from outside sources." This hadn't occurred to me, but now that he mentioned it, I could see how the situation might feel manipulative from my perspective. "Did you know who I was when I walked into the interview?" "Not until you introduced yourself. Cooper is a common name, and I'd only heard about Dr. Cooper's daughters in passing over the years." Ryan paused. But I did realize who you were during the interview, and I should have mentioned it then. Why didn't you? Because I was afraid you'd think I was hiring you for the wrong reasons, or that you'd feel like you couldn't be honest about your background because of the family connection. His mouth twisted ruefully, ironically the exact situation we ended up in anyway. I considered this. Ryan had been trying to protect my privacy and professional autonomy, even though his caution had ended up creating more complications. So when did you realize you wanted to ask me out? About 2 weeks into your first month, when you completely reconstructed the behavioral profile on the Morrison kidnapping case and identified connection patterns that the rest of us had missed. Ryan's smile was soft. You presented your analysis with this intensity and passion that made me understand why you'd chosen this career. That's when I knew I was in trouble. Trouble? Falling for my newest agent, who I couldn't ask out without creating a professional conflict, who I suspected came from a family that might not approve of her dating her supervisor. Ryan reached for my hands. I spent 3 months trying to convince myself that my feelings were just professional admiration. What changed your mind? The Henderson case, when you talked that teenage runaway into coming home safely instead of disappearing into trafficking networks. Ryan's eyes were serious. Watching you connect with that girl, seeing how much you cared about getting her back to her family, I realized I wasn't just attracted to your professional skills. I was falling in love with who you are as a person. The memory of that case still gave me chills. 16-year-old Maria Henderson had been missing for 2 weeks, when we'd finally tracked her to a bus station 3 states away. She'd been planning to meet someone she'd connected with online, someone who'd promised her a modeling career and a better life than the one she was trying to escape. Instead of treating her like a criminal or a victim, I'd sat with her for 4 hours talking about families, dreams, and the difference between running towards something and running away from something. By the end of our conversation, she'd agreed to call her parents and come home. That case was important to me too, I said. It was the first time I felt like my psychology background really made a difference in the outcome. It's made a difference in every case since then. You see things the rest of us miss because you understand people in ways that pure law enforcement training doesn't teach. Ryan squeezed my hands. Your father might not understand why you chose this career, but I see exactly why you're perfect for it. Friday evening, I called my parents to confirm Sunday dinner plans, and found myself in the longest phone conversation I'd had with Dad in years. He wanted to know about my current caseload, my career progression opportunities, and whether the FBI provided adequate safety training for field agents. I've been reading about violent crime statistics in your jurisdiction, he said, as if he was discussing a medical journal article. The numbers seem concerning. Dad, most of my work involves interviewing witnesses and analyzing evidence. I'm not kicking down doors and getting into shootouts. But some of your work involves those activities. I couldn't deny that. Some of it, yes, but I'm extensively trained, I'm never alone in dangerous situations, and I'm very good at my job. Your supervisor seems competent, Dad admitted grudgingly. He spoke intelligently about threat assessment and team protocols. Ryan is one of the best agents in the Bureau. I'm lucky to work with him. And you're romantically involved with him. This was the conversation I'd been dreading. Yes, we are. That seems complicated from a professional standpoint. It can be, but we're both committed to maintaining appropriate boundaries at work. I took a breath. Dad, I know you have concerns about my career and my relationship choices, but I'm happy. I'm good at what I do, and I'm with someone who understands and supports what I do. There was a long pause. I've never seen you this settled before, Dad said finally. In all your years of changing majors and switching directions, you've never sounded this certain about anything. Because I've never been this certain about anything. Your young man said something similar. He said you'd found your calling. The fact that Dad was referring to Ryan as your young man instead of that FBI agent or your supervisor felt significant. He's right. This is what I was meant to do. Then I suppose I need to learn to be comfortable with it. Dad's voice was quiet. I spent so many years watching you struggle to find your direction that I forgot to notice when you finally found it. Sunday dinner started with Mom's barely controlled anxiety about making the right impression and Dad's awkward attempts at small talk that somehow turned into a detailed discussion of federal law enforcement procedures. Ryan handled both with remarkable grace, asking thoughtful questions about Dad's surgical techniques and complimenting Mom's cooking with such obvious sincerity that she visibly relaxed. "So, Agent Martinez," Mom said as she served dessert, "tell us about your family." "My parents live about an hour north of here. Dad's a high school principal. Mom's the nurse you know from the hospital. I have 2 younger sisters. One's finishing her residency in pediatrics, the other's a social worker." "Goodness, what an accomplished family," Mom said, clearly relieved that Ryan came from what she considered respectable professional stock. "They sound lovely," Dad added. "We'd like to meet them sometime." I nearly choked on my coffee. Dad wanting to meet Ryan's parents was definitely not something I'd anticipated. "I'm sure they'd enjoy that," Ryan replied smoothly. Mom's mentioned that she'd like to get to know Sarah better outside of the professional context. "Sarah's told us so little about her work," Mom said with a pointed look in my direction. "We only know what we read in the newspaper articles." "You read articles about my cases?" "Your father keeps a scrapbook," Rebecca said helpfully. "He's very proud, even though he pretends to be worried all the time." Dad actually looked embarrassed. "I like to stay informed about your professional activities." "Dad has copies of every commendation you've received," Mom added. "He wanted to frame them, but I told him that might be presumptuous." Ryan caught my eye across the table, his expression warm with understanding. "Sarah's work has helped solve some very important cases. She has a unique ability to understand victim psychology and perpetrator motivation that's invaluable in complex investigations." "Like the Henderson case," Dad said, surprising me again. "You know about that case?" "I read the follow-up article about teenage trafficking prevention programs. Your work with that girl led to changes in how law enforcement handles runaway cases." Dad's voice carried a note of pride I'd rarely heard before. That seemed like meaningful work. "It is meaningful work," Ryan said firmly. "Sarah's insights have helped us solve cases and save lives. The Bureau is lucky to have her." After dinner, Dad insisted on showing Ryan his study, which apparently included not just the scrapbook of newspaper articles, but also framed copies of my FBI Academy graduation photo, my college diploma, and several commendation letters he'd somehow obtained copies of. "I may not understand why she chose such a dangerous career," Dad told Ryan while I pretended not to eavesdrop from the hallway, "but I understand that she's exceptional at it. And I understand that you see that too." "I do see it, every day." "Good. Because Sarah has spent her entire life believing she was a disappointment to us, when the truth is that we've never known how to express how proud we are of her independence and her achievements." Dad's voice was quieter now. "We just worry about her safety. She's very safety-conscious, Dr. Cooper, and she's never in dangerous situations without backup and support." I'm beginning to understand that. I'm also beginning to understand that trying to convince her to choose a different career would be like asking her to stop being herself. When Ryan and I finally left my parents' house 3 hours later, my head was spinning with revelations and my heart was full in a way it hadn't been in years. "That went well," Ryan said as we drove back to my apartment. "My dad showed you his Sarah shrine and told you he was proud of me. I'm pretty sure this qualifies as a minor miracle. He's been proud of you all along. He just didn't know how to say it in a way that didn't sound like criticism or worry. And you handled Mom's interrogation about your intentions like a seasoned diplomat." Ryan laughed. "Your mother is direct, but she's not subtle. She wants to know if I'm serious about you and whether I'm planning to propose anytime soon." My heart skipped. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that I'm very serious about you, and that when I do propose, she'll be the second person to know." "Second? You'll be the first." Ryan glanced at me as he pulled into my parking lot. "That's not a proposal, by the way. Just a statement of intentions." "Good to know," I managed, though my pulse was racing. Inside my apartment, we settled on the couch with wine and the kind of comfortable intimacy that had developed over 6 months of learning each other's rhythms and preferences. "Can I ask you something?" I said, curled against Ryan's side. "Always. Are you really okay with dating someone whose family situation is this complicated? I mean, now you know that my dad keeps a scrapbook of my work achievements and my mom is already planning our wedding in her head. Sarah, every family is complicated in different ways. Your parents love you and want to understand your choices, even when those choices scare them. That's not a problem. That's a gift. What about the professional complications? Dating your subordinate has to create challenges I'm not even thinking about. Ryan was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. There are challenges. I have to be more careful about assignment decisions to make sure I'm not showing favoritism or putting you in situations that seem influenced by our personal relationship. I have to document everything more thoroughly to prove that professional decisions are based on merit rather than personal feelings. Does that bother you? The extra paperwork is annoying, but the relationship is worth it. Ryan's arm tightened around me. The bigger challenge is that I sometimes have to make decisions that could put you in danger, and separating my professional judgment from my personal feelings about your safety isn't always easy. This was something I'd wondered about but hadn't wanted to ask. Have you ever made a decision about my assignments based on wanting to keep me safe? Once. Early in our relationship, there was an undercover assignment that would have been perfect for your skill set, but it involved potential exposure to trafficking networks. I assigned it to Martinez instead because I couldn't be objective about the risk assessment. I sat up to look at him. Ryan, you can't do that. I need to know that my assignments are based on professional considerations, not personal ones. I know, that's why I told you about it. His expression was serious. I realized afterward that protecting you from appropriate professional challenges would be more damaging to your career than the actual risks involved. I haven't made that mistake again. Promise me you won't make it again. I need to know that our relationship isn't going to limit my professional opportunities. I promise. But I also need you to promise that you'll tell me if you ever feel like I'm treating you differently because of our personal relationship, either positively or negatively. I promise. I settled back against his shoulder. This is all new territory for both of us. It is, but we're figuring it out. Monday morning brought a new case that would test everything Ryan and I had discussed about maintaining professional boundaries. A series of kidnappings in the metro area appeared to be connected, with all victims being young professional women who'd been taken from secure locations. The unsub is sophisticated, Ryan told the team during our briefing. He's managed to abduct 4 women over the past 6 weeks without leaving physical evidence or being spotted by security cameras. This suggests extensive planning and detailed knowledge of his target's routines. I studied the case files, noting patterns in the victims' backgrounds and the locations where they'd been taken. He's not choosing victims randomly. Look at the demographics. All 4 women are between 25 and 30. All have graduate degrees. All work in professional settings that require security clearance or background checks. What does that suggest? Agent Martinez asked. He's targeting women he sees as high value, intelligent, accomplished, potentially resistant to typical manipulation tactics. I pointed to the timeline we'd constructed. The intervals between kidnappings are getting shorter. He's escalating, but he's also getting more confident. Ryan nodded. Cooper, I want you to work with the behavioral analysis team to develop a more detailed profile. Martinez, coordinate with local PD on the physical evidence review. Over the next 3 days, I immersed myself in the case, analyzing everything from the victim's social media presence to their professional networks. The pattern that emerged was disturbing. All 4 women had recently ended serious relationships, and all had been active on dating apps or professional networking sites in the weeks before their disappearances. He's hunting, I told Ryan during our case review meeting. These aren't random abductions. He's identifying targets through their online activity and then stalking them until he can find the perfect opportunity to take them. Any luck identifying how he's gaining access to secure locations? I think he's using social engineering. 3 of the 4 locations had recent service visits, maintenance, cleaning, delivery in the days before the kidnappings. I'm betting he's posing as service personnel to gain access and gather intelligence about security protocols. Ryan's expression was grim. If you're right, he could be targeting any professional woman in the city. We need to warn potential victims without causing mass panic. The investigation intensified over the following week. We worked 12-hour days, following leads that seemed promising but ultimately led nowhere. The unsub was careful, methodical, and clearly experienced in avoiding detection. It was during our 2nd week on the case that the breakthrough came from an unexpected source. I was reviewing social media activity for potential connections between victims when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Ryan, I need to show you something. He looked up from his laptop, immediately alert to the urgency in my voice. Look at this. I turned my screen toward him, showing the dating app profiles I'd been analyzing. All 4 victims had interactions with the same user account in the weeks before they disappeared. The profile belonged to someone calling himself Marcus Chen, claiming to be a 32-year-old marketing consultant. His photos showed an attractive man with a warm smile, and his profile was perfectly crafted to appeal to professional women. Articulate, successful, looking for something serious. He's using the dating app to identify and research targets, I continued. Look at the message patterns. He initiates contact, has brief conversations to gauge interest, and then doesn't follow up. He's not trying to actually date them. He's gathering information. Information about their schedules, their work locations, their living situations, Ryan realized. Everything he'd need to plan an abduction. And look at this. I pulled up another screen showing location data. His profile shows recent activity in areas where other young professional women have reported feeling stalked or followed, women who haven't been taken yet. He's building a target list. Within hours, we had a task force working to identify other women who'd been contacted by the Marcus Chen profile. What we found was terrifying. He'd been active on multiple dating platforms for over a year, contacting hundreds of women and maintaining detailed notes about their responses. More disturbing was the discovery that several women had reported strange incidents after interacting with the profile, feeling followed, finding evidence that someone had been in their apartments, receiving gifts or flowers with no indication of who'd sent them. He's been practicing, I told the team during our emergency briefing, building his skills, refining his techniques, studying potential victims to understand their vulnerabilities. Do we have any leads on his actual identity? Agent Martinez asked. We're working with the dating platforms to trace the account creation and payment information, but he's been careful to use false identities and prepaid payment methods. Ryan looked at the evidence board we'd constructed, covered with photos, timelines, and connection maps. Cooper, what's your assessment of his likely next move? This was the moment I'd been dreading. Based on the behavioral profile I'd developed, the unsub was escalating rapidly and showing signs of increasing desperation. He'd likely continue taking victims until he was caught, or until something disrupted his hunting grounds. He's going to accelerate, I said. The intervals between kidnappings have been shortening, and his target selection is becoming less careful. He's getting overconfident, which makes him more dangerous but also more likely to make mistakes. What kind of mistakes? He might target someone in a higher-risk location or someone whose disappearance would be noticed more quickly. He might also start deviating from his established patterns if he feels pressure from our investigation. What I didn't say, what I couldn't say in front of the whole team, was that the behavioral profile suggested the unsub was likely to become violent toward his existing victims if he felt cornered. The 4 women he'd already taken were in increasing danger with every day that passed. That evening, Ryan and I stayed late to review the case files again, searching for any detail we might have missed. You're worried about the victims he's already taken, Ryan said quietly. The profile suggests he's kept them alive for a reason, either as trophies or because he has some fantasy about converting them to willing participants in whatever scenario he's constructed. I rubbed my eyes, exhausted from staring at screens all day. But if he feels threatened by our investigation, he might decide they're liabilities instead of assets. We're gonna find him, Sarah. I hope so, but I'm afraid we're running out of time. Ryan reached across the table to squeeze my hand, a brief moment of personal comfort in the middle of professional crisis. Your profile work has been exceptional on this case. We're closer to identifying him because of your insights. I just hope it's enough. The next morning brought news that confirmed my worst fears. A 5th woman had been reported missing, Jennifer Walsh, a 28-year-old attorney who'd last been seen leaving her office building the previous evening. Security footage showed her walking to her car in the underground parking garage, but she'd never made it home. More concerning was the discovery that Jennifer's car had been found abandoned less than 2 miles from where the other victims had been taken. The unsub was becoming bolder, taking bigger risks, operating in a smaller geographic area. He's devolving, I told Ryan during our morning briefing. The pattern is breaking down, which means he's either getting desperate or he's building towards some kind of endgame. What kind of endgame? This was the question I'd been trying not to think about. Either he's planning to disappear with his existing victims, or he's planning to eliminate evidence and start over somewhere else. The investigation took on new urgency. Every available agent was assigned to the case, and we coordinated with local law enforcement agencies across 3 states to monitor for similar patterns or suspicious activity. It was Agent Martinez who found the break we'd been looking for. While reviewing financial records associated with the fake Marcus Chen profile, he'd discovered a connection to a property rental company that specialized in short-term commercial leases. The payment trail leads to a warehouse district about 20 miles outside the city, Martinez reported. The property was leased 6 months ago by someone using the same false identity credentials as the dating profile. That's our location, Ryan said immediately. Cooper, Martinez. Gear up. We're going in. The warehouse district felt like a wasteland, abandoned buildings, empty lots, and industrial structures that had been left to decay as businesses moved to more modern facilities. The building we'd identified sat in the middle of the complex, surrounded by chain-link fencing and overgrown vegetation that provided perfect cover for illegal activities. Visual confirmation of vehicles matching stolen transportation used in the kidnappings, Martinez reported through his radio as we approached the perimeter. Movement in the upper-level windows, I added, noting shadows passing behind dirty glass, multiple heat signatures on thermal imaging. Ryan coordinated with the tactical team that had been called in to assist with the arrest. The plan was straightforward: surround the building, announce our presence, and demand surrender. If the unsub refused to cooperate, the tactical team would breach the building and secure the victims. What we found inside was worse than anything I'd imagined from the behavioral profile. The warehouse had been converted into a series of small rooms, each equipped with basic furniture and extensive surveillance equipment. The 4 missing women were being held in separate spaces, their movements monitored constantly by cameras that fed to a central control room where the unsub had been tracking their every action. He's been studying them, I realized as we processed the scene, learning their patterns, their responses to stress, their psychological vulnerabilities. This isn't just kidnapping, it's behavioral experimentation. The victims were physically unharmed but psychologically traumatized by weeks of captivity under constant observation. They'd been fed regularly and provided with basic necessities, but they'd been completely isolated from the outside world and from each other. The unsub himself had fled before our arrival, leaving behind a treasure trove of evidence about his methods and motivations. His computer files revealed the full scope of his activities, not just the 5 local kidnappings, but similar operations in at least 3 other cities over the past 5 years. He's been perfecting this system, I told Ryan as we reviewed the digital evidence. Each location, he's refined his techniques and expanded his victim profile. This was never about these specific women. They were test subjects for whatever he's planning next. Do we have any leads on where he might have gone? The computer files suggested he'd been preparing for the possibility of discovery. Financial records showed recent transactions in multiple states, and travel documents indicated he'd been researching locations for potential new operations. He's mobile and well-funded, I concluded, but he's also a creature of habit. He'll try to replicate this setup somewhere else, which means he'll need similar resources: warehouse space, internet connectivity, access to hunting grounds with the right demographic profile. The manhunt that followed lasted 3 weeks and involved coordination with federal agencies across the country. It was Agent Martinez who finally spotted the pattern that led us to the unsub's new location, a series of financial transactions in a college town that matched the profile I'd developed. Marcus Chen turned out to be David Morrison, a 34-year-old software engineer with a history of stalking charges that had never resulted in convictions. He'd been using his technical skills to create false identities and avoid detection for years, moving from city to city and refining his methods with each operation. When we finally arrested him at his new warehouse location in Colorado, he seemed almost relieved to be caught. During his interrogation, He talked extensively about his research and his belief that he was conducting important psychological experiments. The women were never in real danger, he insisted, apparently believing his own justifications. I was studying human adaptation to controlled environments. The data I collected could have been valuable for understanding social dynamics. It was textbook narcissistic rationalization, the same kind of thinking that allowed serial offenders to justify increasingly serious crimes by convincing themselves they were serving some higher purpose. The case made national news, partly because of the sophisticated methods Morrison had used and partly because of the multi-state investigation that had been required to stop him. I found myself fielding interview requests from law enforcement publications and academic journals, interested in the behavioral analysis techniques we'd used to identify and track him. You should consider presenting this case at the next behavioral analysis conference, Ryan suggested as we finished our final case reports. Your profiling work was instrumental in solving it. I'm not sure I'm ready for that level of professional exposure. Why not? You've proven that you can handle complex cases and develop insights that save lives. That's exactly the kind of expertise the law enforcement community needs to learn from. Ryan was right, but the idea of presenting my work to a room full of experienced agents and forensic psychologists was terrifying. I'd been with the FBI for less than 2 years, and I still felt like I was learning the basics of federal investigation techniques. What if they ask questions I can't answer? What if my analysis was just lucky guesses instead of sound methodology? Sarah, you've solved 3 major cases in the past year using behavioral analysis techniques that impressed everyone who worked with you. That's not luck. That's skill and training and natural aptitude. Ryan's voice was gentle but firm. You belong in that room with those experts, because you are one of those experts. The conference presentation ended up being a turning point in my career. The response from other agents and forensic psychologists was overwhelmingly positive, and I found myself being invited to consult on cases in other jurisdictions. More importantly, the experience helped me understand that I'd finally found not just a career I was good at, but a professional identity I could be proud of. I wasn't just someone who'd struggled to find her direction. I was someone who'd discovered unique talents and learned to apply them in meaningful ways. 6 months later, Ryan and I were working late on a complex fraud case when he surprised me with an observation that seemed to come out of nowhere. Your confidence has changed, he said, looking up from the financial records we'd been reviewing. What do you mean? When you first started here, you approached every case like you were trying to prove you belonged. Now you approach cases like you know you belong, Ryan smiled. It's been amazing to watch. He was right. Somewhere in the process of solving difficult cases and presenting my work to respected colleagues, I'd stopped feeling like an imposter and started feeling like a professional. I'd stopped second-guessing my instincts and started trusting my training and experience. I think it started with my family understanding what I actually do for a living, I said. Once I stopped worrying about proving myself to them, I could focus on just doing the work. And once you stopped worrying about whether I'd hired you for the right reasons, you could focus on showing me why I'd hired you. Are you saying I was overthinking things again? Ryan laughed. I'm saying you were worried about problems that didn't actually exist, which freed up mental energy for solving problems that did exist once you realized the first problems weren't real. It was a fair assessment. So much of my early career anxiety had been based on assumptions about other people's opinions, rather than on actual feedback or evidence. Once I'd learned to distinguish between real challenges and imaginary ones, I'd been able to focus on developing my skills instead of managing my insecurities. Speaking of real versus imaginary problems, Ryan said, his tone shifting to something more serious, there's something I want to discuss with you. My heart rate immediately spiked. Professional or personal? Both, sort of. Ryan saved his work and turned to face me. I've been offered a promotion, regional supervisor position, based in Chicago. The words hit me like a physical blow. Ryan getting promoted was wonderful news for his career, but it would mean leaving our team, leaving this office, leaving me. That's a great opportunity. It is, but it would mean relocating, and it would mean we'd no longer be working together. I tried to process the implications. If Ryan moved to Chicago, we'd be in a long-distance relationship, which was challenging under the best circumstances. If he moved and I stayed, we'd also be giving up the professional partnership that had become such an important part of both our careers. When do you have to decide? I have 2 weeks to give them an answer. Ryan's expression was carefully neutral, the same professional mask he wore during difficult briefings. But before I make any decisions, I need to know how you feel about it. How I feel about your career advancement. I think you should take the promotion if it's what you want. That's not what I'm asking. Ryan's voice was gentler now. I'm asking how you feel about us, about our relationship, about whether you see a future that could work with the complications this opportunity would create. This was a bigger conversation than I'd been prepared for. We'd been dating for over a year, and we'd talked about long-term plans in general terms, but we'd never discussed specific scenarios like job relocations or major career decisions. I love you, I said, because that seemed like the most important thing to establish first, and I want your career to flourish, even if that creates challenges for us personally. I love you too, which is why I'm not making this decision unilaterally. Ryan reached for my hands. The Chicago position is a significant advancement, but it's not the only path forward for my career. There will be other opportunities. But this might be the best opportunity. Maybe. Or maybe the best opportunity is the one that allows me to build a life with the person I want to marry. My breath caught. Is that a proposal? It's a statement of intentions, like I told your mother. Ryan's smile was soft. I'm not proposing tonight in an office while we're discussing job relocations. But I am telling you that my career plans include planning a future with you, and I want to make sure your career plans include the same possibility. They do, I said without hesitation. I mean, yes, I want a future with you. I want to marry you and build a life together and figure out how to balance two demanding careers with a personal relationship. Even if it means one of us has to make compromises or sacrifices for the other's opportunities? This was the question that kept many dual-career couples awake at night. How do you balance individual ambition with shared goals? How do you decide whose opportunity takes priority when you can't have everything you want at the same time? I think we figure it out case by case, I said slowly. I think we support each other's dreams while being honest about what we're willing to sacrifice and what we're not. What are you willing to sacrifice? I thought about this carefully. I'm willing to relocate if it means we can both have careers we're passionate about. I'm willing to take on more household responsibilities if your job demands more travel. I'm willing to adjust my timeline for certain personal goals if professional opportunities arise that are too good to pass up. What aren't you willing to sacrifice? I'm not willing to give up doing work that matters to me. I'm not willing to subordinate my career to yours by default without discussion and mutual agreement. I'm not willing to pretend that professional fulfillment isn't important to me just because I also want a family and a marriage. Ryan nodded. Those seem like reasonable boundaries, and they're boundaries I can work with. What about you? What are you willing to sacrifice? I'm willing to turn down opportunities if they would require you to sacrifice more than is fair or reasonable. I'm willing to take on more domestic responsibilities if your job demands more of your time. I'm willing to be the trailing spouse if an amazing opportunity comes up for you that requires relocation. And what aren't you willing to sacrifice? I'm not willing to give up work that challenges me intellectually and makes me feel like I'm contributing something meaningful. I'm not willing to resent you for professional decisions I supported, and I'm not willing to support decisions I don't actually agree with just to avoid conflict. These were exactly the kinds of conversations that successful dual-career couples needed to have early and often. We were establishing boundaries and expectations that would help us navigate future decisions without damaging our relationship or our individual professional identities. So what does this mean for the Chicago opportunity? Ryan was quiet for a moment, clearly weighing his options. I want to talk to them about whether there might be opportunities for you in the Chicago field office. If there are, and if there are opportunities you'd be excited about, then we could consider relocating together. And if there aren't opportunities for me, then I turn it down, and we keep building our careers here until the next opportunity comes along, either for me or for you. The idea that Ryan would turn down a major promotion rather than ask me to sacrifice my career was both touching and slightly overwhelming. I'd grown up watching my mother subordinate her professional ambitions to support my father's medical career. And I'd always assumed that's how marriages worked when both people had demanding professions. You'd really turn down the Chicago job if it meant I'd have to give up my career here? Sarah, I've watched you discover that you're exceptional at this work. I've seen how much satisfaction you get from solving complex cases and helping victims. I've seen how hard you've worked to develop expertise that's recognized and respected by your colleagues. Ryan's expression was serious. I can't ask you to give that up for my career advancement. That wouldn't be a partnership. That would be asking you to be an accessory to my life instead of an equal participant in our shared life. This was the moment I realized that Ryan truly understood not just what my career meant to me, but what equality in our relationship needed to look like for both of us to thrive. I want to research the Chicago opportunities, I said. Even if I can't transfer directly, there might be consulting opportunities or ways to maintain my specialization while building experience in a new field office. Only if that's what you want professionally, not just what would make my career easier. I think it could be good for both of our careers. New challenges, broader experience, opportunity to work with different teams and different types of cases. I paused. But I want us to make this decision together, with full information about what we'd both be gaining and what we'd both be giving up. Ryan's research into Chicago opportunities turned up possibilities I hadn't expected. The FBI's Chicago field office had an opening in their behavioral analysis unit that would actually be a promotion for me, supervisory special agent, leading a team of analysts working on complex cases across the Midwest region. It's a bigger job than anything I'd be eligible for here for at least 3 more years, I told Ryan after reviewing the position description. If I could get it, it would be a significant advancement for my career, too. Are you interested in supervisory work? I think so. I've been mentoring newer agents here, and I've enjoyed the teaching and leadership aspects of that work. I looked at the job requirements again. The position would involve coordinating with multiple field offices, developing training programs, and consulting on cases that cross jurisdictional boundaries. It sounds challenging and rewarding. It also sounds like the kind of work that could lead to even better opportunities down the line. He was right. A supervisory position in behavioral analysis would open doors that might otherwise take years to access. And the Chicago field office had a reputation for handling high-profile, complex cases that would provide excellent experience for advancing to even more senior positions. I want to apply, I decided. Even if I don't get it, the interview process would be good experience. And if you do get it? Then we both move to Chicago for career advancement, which seems like the ideal outcome. The application and interview process took 6 weeks, during which Ryan delayed giving his final answer to the Chicago position. His future supervisors were understanding about the delay once he explained that his decision depended partly on his girlfriend's job search, though I suspected they were less understanding about the fact that he was dating a subordinate. Is our relationship going to create problems for your promotion? I asked after Ryan mentioned that he'd been asked several pointed questions about professional boundaries and potential conflicts of interest. Nothing we can't handle. The Chicago position would actually make things easier, since we'd be in different departments with different supervisory chains. But in the meantime, people are questioning your professional judgment. Ryan's expression darkened slightly. Let them question. My professional judgment has resulted in successful case resolutions and effective team performance. Our relationship hasn't interfered with that record. I don't want to be the reason you face professional criticism. You're not. The criticism comes from people who think personal relationships automatically compromise professional effectiveness. Our experience proves that's not necessarily true, but changing institutional attitudes takes time. The FBI job interview was one of the most intense professional experiences of my life. 3 hours of questions about case analysis, leadership philosophy, training methodology, and crisis management scenarios. The interview panel included supervisory agents from Chicago, Quantico, and Washington, all of whom had read my case reports and presentation materials from the Behavioral Analysis Conference. Agent Cooper, said Supervisory Special Agent Patricia Williams, who led the Chicago Behavioral Analysis Unit, your casework demonstrates strong analytical skills and effective field application of psychological principles. But this position would require you to develop those skills in other agents while managing a team's caseload and coordinating with outside agencies. How do you see yourself making that transition? I believe effective supervision requires balancing support with challenge, I replied, drawing on my experiences mentoring newer agents. My goal would be to help team members develop their own analytical capabilities while providing guidance that improves case outcomes. I'd want to create an environment where agents feel comfortable bringing complex problems to the team for collaborative solution, rather than feeling like they need to have all the answers independently. Can you give us an example of how you've applied that philosophy in your current position? I described my work with Agent Roberts, a new agent who'd struggled with victim interviews until I'd helped him develop techniques for building rapport and managing his own emotional responses to traumatic cases. Within 6 months, he'd become one of our most effective interviewers. The key was helping him understand that empathy and professional objectivity aren't mutually exclusive, I explained. Once he learned to use his emotional responses as information rather than obstacles, he became much more effective at connecting with witnesses and victims. This position would also involve significant coordination with local law enforcement agencies that may not have extensive experience with behavioral analysis techniques, Agent Williams continued. How would you approach those relationships? I think education and collaboration are essential. Local agencies often have insights about cases and communities that federal agents miss, but they may not have training in behavioral analysis methods. My approach would be to share our analytical techniques while learning from their local knowledge, creating partnerships that benefit everyone involved. The interview continued with scenario-based questions that tested my ability to think strategically about complex cases and manage competing priorities. By the time it ended, I felt exhausted but cautiously optimistic about my performance. When will you know? Ryan asked when I called him afterward. 2 weeks. Agent Williams said they're interviewing candidates through the end of next week, and then they'll make their decision. How do you feel about it? Like I want the job more than I realized when I applied for it. I paused. It would be scary, taking on that much responsibility so early in my career. But it would also be exactly the kind of challenge I've been hoping for. The waiting period was excruciating. I found myself checking my phone constantly for messages and analyzing every interaction with my current supervisors for signs about what they might have said in reference calls. Ryan was patient with my anxiety, but clearly struggling with his own uncertainty about whether to accept the Chicago promotion. Whatever happens with your application, I need to give them an answer by Friday, he said as we approached the 2-week mark. What are you leaning toward? If you get the Chicago job, I take the promotion and we move together. If you don't get it, I turn down the promotion and we stay here. Ryan's expression was calm, but I could see the tension around his eyes. Unless you have strong feelings about wanting to move regardless of your job situation. I don't want to move to Chicago without a career plan that makes sense for me. But I also don't want you to turn down a great opportunity because of my application timeline. Sarah, we're in this together. Your career success is just as important to me as my own. On Thursday afternoon, Agent Williams called with news that changed everything. Agent Cooper, we'd like to offer you the supervisory position in our behavioral analysis unit. Are you interested in accepting? Yes, I said immediately, then caught myself. Yes, I'm very interested. Can I have some time to review the details and discuss it with my family? Of course. I'll email you the formal offer letter with salary information and timeline expectations. We'd like you to start in 6 weeks if possible, which would give you time to wrap up current cases and relocate. After I hung up, I sat in my car for 10 minutes trying to process what had just happened. I'd gotten the job. Not only had I gotten it, but Agent Williams had sounded genuinely excited about bringing me onto her team. Ryan was in a meeting when I called, so I had to wait until evening to share the news. But when I finally told him, his reaction was everything I'd hoped for. Sarah, that's incredible. Congratulations. He picked me up and spun me around my apartment living room. I'm so proud of you. So you're going to accept the Chicago promotion? I'm going to accept the Chicago promotion. We're both going to accept Chicago promotions, and we're going to be that insufferably successful couple that everyone secretly envies. I can live with that. The next few weeks passed in a blur of case wrap-ups, goodbye parties, and apartment hunting via video calls. My parents were thrilled about my promotion and slightly less thrilled about the move, but they handled it well overall. I'm proud of you for taking this opportunity, Dad told me during our farewell dinner. It sounds like exactly the kind of challenging, meaningful work you're meant to do. Are you worried about me being even further from home? I'm always worried about your safety, but I'm not worried about your ability to handle whatever challenges come with this new position. Dad smiled. You've proven that you can succeed in this career, and you've found someone who supports your success. That's what matters most. Mom was more direct. When are you and Ryan getting married? I want to start planning. Mom, we haven't even moved to Chicago yet. You're building a life together. That's what matters. The wedding is just paperwork. Ryan and I drove to Chicago together on a sunny Saturday in October, our cars loaded with everything we owned and our heads full of plans for our new life. We'd found an apartment in a neighborhood that offered reasonable commutes to both our offices, and we'd spent hours researching restaurants, cultural attractions, and running routes that would help us build a social life in our new city. Are you nervous? Ryan asked as we crossed the state line. Terrified, I admitted, but also excited. This feels like the biggest adventure we've taken together. The first of many, I hope. 6 months later, on a cold February evening, Ryan proposed in our Chicago apartment while we were cooking dinner together. It wasn't a dramatic gesture with flowers and music. It was a quiet moment when he looked at me while I was stirring pasta sauce and said, "Sarah, will you marry me?" I said yes without hesitation, and then we called our parents to share the news. Dad cried, which I'd never seen him do before. Mom immediately started talking about venues and guest lists. Ryan's parents were thrilled and wanted to know when they could come visit to celebrate with us. How long have you been planning this? I asked later as we lay in bed, my new engagement ring catching light from the street lamps outside our window. Since about 3 months into dating you, but I wanted to wait until we'd successfully navigated a major life transition together. Ryan pulled me closer. I needed to know that we could handle stress and uncertainty and major decisions as a team. And do we pass the test? With flying colors. Our wedding was small and perfect, held in my parents' backyard with immediate family and close friends. Agent Williams flew in from Chicago, along with several colleagues from both our offices. My dad officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion, and his ceremony emphasized the importance of partnership, mutual support, and shared commitment to making the world a better place. Sarah and Ryan have built their relationship on a foundation of respect for each other's individual strengths and shared commitment to meaningful work, Dad said during the ceremony. They've shown us that love means supporting each other's dreams, even when those dreams are challenging or require sacrifice. During our first year of marriage, we developed routines and traditions that helped us balance our demanding careers with our personal relationship. Weekly date nights that were completely work-free, monthly weekend trips to explore our new city and region, daily check-ins about both professional challenges and personal needs. Most importantly, we learned to communicate about career decisions and life changes before they became sources of stress or conflict. When Ryan was offered an opportunity to lead a federal task force that would require significant travel, we discussed the implications for both our careers and our marriage before he made his decision. When I was invited to speak at international conferences about behavioral analysis techniques, we talked about how to manage the time away from home and the additional professional visibility. The key is making sure we're both getting what we need professionally while still being present for each other personally, Ryan observed during one of our anniversary dinners. And making sure we're making decisions together, rather than just informing each other about decisions we've already made, I added. Now 5 years after we moved to Chicago and 3 years after we got married, I'm preparing for another career transition. The FBI has offered me a position in their training division at Quantico, developing curriculum and teaching techniques for behavioral analysis to agents around the world. It's an incredible opportunity that would allow me to influence how hundreds of agents approach complex cases. It would also mean another move, another period of adjustment, another test of our ability to navigate career changes together. What do you think? I asked Ryan after describing the opportunity to him. I think it sounds like the perfect next step for your career, and I think Quantico would be lucky to have you. Ryan smiled. I also think there are probably opportunities for me in the DC area that would be just as exciting as what I'm doing here. You'd be willing to move again? For the right opportunity for both of us? Absolutely. As I consider this new possibility, I'm struck by how different my life has become from what I'd imagined when I first inherited that farm and discovered what was growing there. I've gone from being someone who questioned my own competence to someone who's recognized as an expert in my field. I've gone from being afraid my family would never understand my choices to having parents who actively support my career. I've gone from worrying that no one would ever love me for who I really am to being married to someone who sees my ambitions and quirks as assets rather than obstacles. Most importantly, I've learned that family legacy isn't just what you inherit, it's what you choose to build with the opportunities and challenges you encounter. Ryan and I are building something good together, something based on mutual respect and shared values, and the kind of love that makes both people stronger, rather than asking either person to be smaller. The seeds my grandfather tried to plant in his fields grew into something he never could have imagined. A commitment to justice that defined my career, a strength born from facing difficult truths, and the wisdom to know that love can overcome even the darkest family secrets when it's paired with courage and honesty. Ryan proved to be someone who could love me not despite my complicated family history and demanding career, but because of the person those experiences had helped me become. And I've learned to love him not just for his patience and support, but for his own ambitions and integrity, and his belief that two people can build a life together without either one sacrificing their individual dreams. The future is full of possibilities we haven't even imagined yet. New cities, new challenges, new opportunities to grow both individually and together. But whatever comes next, we'll face it as partners who've learned that love means supporting each other's highest aspirations, rather than settling for comfortable compromises. Dad was wrong when he thought I was a disappointment who was wasting my potential. But he was right about one thing. I needed someone who could see my strengths clearly enough to help me believe in them myself. Ryan turned out to be that person, and our relationship turned out to be the foundation that allowed me to become who I was meant to be. The stories we tell ourselves about love and success and family can either limit us or liberate us. I chose to write a story about a woman who found her calling, her partner, and her place in a family that learned to celebrate her choices rather than fear them. It's been a good story so far, and I think the best chapters are still ahead of us. The future is full of possibilities we haven't even imagined yet. New cities, new challenges, new opportunities to grow both individually and together. But whatever comes next, we'll face it as partners, who've learned that love means supporting each other's highest aspirations, rather than settling for comfortable compromises. Pious Goth. Dad was wrong when he thought I was a disappointment who was wasting my potential. But he was right about one thing. I needed someone who could see my strengths clearly enough to help me believe in them myself. Ryan turned out to be that person, and our relationship turned out to be the foundation that allowed me to become who I was meant to be. The stories we tell ourselves about love and success and family can either limit us or liberate us. I chose to write a story about a woman who found her calling, her partner, and her place in a family that learned to celebrate her choices rather than fear them. It's been a good story so far, and I think the best chapters are still ahead of us. The decision about Quantico came easier than I'd expected. After weeks of research and conversations with colleagues, Ryan found an opportunity with the FBI's Critical Incident Response Group that would not only match his current position, but expand his expertise into crisis management and tactical coordination. "We're both getting promotions," he said when he called me with the news, "and we're both getting to work on cases that could have national impact." So we're really doing this? Moving to Virginia and starting over again? We're doing this, together. The transition to Quantico felt different from our move to Chicago. We were older, more confident in our careers, and more secure in our relationship. Instead of feeling like we were taking a leap into the unknown, it felt like we were stepping into roles we'd been preparing for our entire professional lives. My position in the training division exceeded every expectation I'd had. I was developing curriculum that would be used by agents across the country, consulting on complex cases from multiple field offices, and teaching at the FBI Academy. The work combined everything I loved about behavioral analysis, with the satisfaction of watching new agents develop skills that would serve them throughout their careers. "You're in your element," Ryan observed one evening as I worked on a training manual for crisis negotiation techniques. "I don't think I've ever seen you this professionally fulfilled." He was right. After years of proving myself in individual cases, I was now helping to shape how the entire bureau approached behavioral analysis. It felt like the perfect culmination of everything I'd learned since that first day I'd walked into Ryan's office for an interview. 6 months into our time at Quantico, I received a call that brought our story full circle in a way I never could have anticipated. Agent Martinez? The voice was unfamiliar, but the name that followed was one I'd never forgotten. This is Dr. Rebecca Santos from the Victim Care Facility in Colorado. I have some news about the Morrison case that I thought you and Agent Martinez would want to hear. My blood ran cold. The plant horror case had been the first major investigation that had shaped my understanding of long-term psychological trauma and family complicity in criminal behavior. I'd assumed that chapter of my career was closed. What kind of news? Linda Morrison, one of the survivors, has made a remarkable recovery. She's been working with our therapeutic team for years, and she's reached a point where she's interested in sharing her experience to help prevent similar cases. This was unexpected. The victims of Grandfather Joe's experiments had been so severely psychologically damaged that most experts believed full recovery was impossible. The idea that one of them was not only recovered but ready to help others seemed almost miraculous. She specifically asked if she could speak with you and Agent Martinez. She said reading about your family's experience in the congressional testimony helped her understand that survival meant more than just healing. It meant using that healing to help others. 2 weeks later, Ryan and I drove to Colorado to meet with Linda. The woman we found was dramatically different from the broken person we'd encountered years earlier. She moved with confidence, spoke clearly and thoughtfully, and radiated the kind of inner strength that comes from having survived something terrible and chosen to grow from it rather than be destroyed by it. "I wanted to thank you," she told us as we sat in the facility's garden. "Your family's decision to expose what happened, to fight for justice instead of just walking away, it saved my life in more ways than one." "How so?" "When I first arrived here, I was convinced that I was permanently damaged, that what had been done to me had destroyed any possibility of a normal life." Linda's voice was steady, matter-of-fact. "But then I read about your family's experience, about how you'd turned something horrible into something meaningful. It helped me understand that survival could be the beginning of something good instead of just the end of something bad." She explained that she'd spent the past 3 years working with therapists to not only heal from her own trauma, but to develop insights that could help other victims of long-term psychological manipulation. "I want to work with law enforcement agencies to help them understand what victims of this kind of abuse experience, and how to approach survivors in ways that support recovery rather than re-traumatizing them," she said. Ryan and I exchanged glances. This was exactly the kind of expertise that the FBI's Victim Services Division needed, and exactly the kind of collaboration that could improve outcomes for future cases. "Would you be interested in consulting with our training programs?" I asked. "We're always looking for survivor perspectives to help agents understand the psychological impact of different types of crimes. I'd be honored to help." That conversation led to an ongoing partnership that enriched our training programs immeasurably. Linda became a regular consultant, sharing her insights with new agents and helping them understand the long-term recovery process for victims of sophisticated psychological manipulation. More importantly, working with Linda helped me understand something crucial about my own family's story. We hadn't just survived a encounter with evil. We transformed that encounter into something that continued to help others long after the immediate crisis was over. A year later, I was approached by a publisher who wanted me to write a book about behavioral analysis techniques for complex cases. The book would combine case studies, training methodologies, and insights about the psychological factors that influence both criminal behavior and investigation outcomes. It would be the definitive resource for agents working on cases involving sophisticated offenders, the editor explained. "Your combination of field experience, training expertise, and academic background makes you uniquely qualified to write it." The project took 2 years to complete, with Ryan serving as my sounding board and primary editor. The book was published to positive reviews in law enforcement publications and academic journals, and it became required reading at the FBI Academy. But the most meaningful response came from agents in the field, who told me the book had helped them solve cases and better serve victims. I received letters from investigators around the world who said the behavioral analysis techniques I'd described had provided crucial insights for their most challenging cases. "You've officially become the expert you were always meant to be," Ryan told me at the book launch party. "Remember when you were worried that you didn't belong in a room with other behavioral analysis experts? Now you're the one other experts come to for advice." He was right. My career had evolved from someone desperately trying to prove herself to someone whose expertise was sought out by colleagues across the profession. The transformation felt complete, but not finished. There were always new cases to solve, new agents to train, new insights to develop. Our personal life had evolved just as dramatically. We'd bought a house near Quantico, adopted a dog who thought Ryan walked on water, and established traditions that made us feel like a real family unit. Sunday dinners with my parents when we could visit, holiday celebrations that combined both our families, quiet evenings at home where we could decompress from our demanding careers. Most importantly, we'd learned to navigate the ongoing challenges of two high-pressure careers without losing sight of why we'd fallen in love in the first place. We still had our weekly work-free date nights, our monthly adventure weekends, our daily check-ins about both professional challenges and personal needs. "What's next for us?" I asked Ryan one evening as we sat on our back porch watching our dog chase fireflies in the yard. "What do you want to be next?" I thought about this question seriously. My career was thriving, our relationship was strong, and our families had learned to celebrate our choices rather than worry about them. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I'd achieved the major goals I'd set for myself. "I think I want to start thinking about a family," I said. "Not immediately, but soon. I want to have children with you and raise them to believe they can do anything they set their minds to." Ryan smiled. "I've been hoping you'd say that. I think we'd be good parents. Even with our crazy work schedules and demanding careers?" "Especially with our crazy work schedules and demanding careers, we've learned how to support each other through challenges, how to communicate about competing priorities, how to make decisions together even when those decisions are complicated." Ryan reached for my hand. "Those are exactly the skills that make good parents." 6 months later, I found out I was pregnant. The timing wasn't perfect. I was in the middle of developing a new training program, and Ryan was leading a task force that required extensive travel. But we'd learned that there's never a perfect time for major life changes, and that the best decisions are often the ones that require you to grow into them, rather than waiting until you feel completely ready. My parents were over the moon about becoming grandparents. Dad immediately started researching the best pediatricians in our area and offering unsolicited advice about prenatal care. Mom began knitting baby blankets and talking about converting their guest room into a nursery for visits. "I'm proud of the life you've built," Dad told me during one of our phone calls. "You've found work that matters to you, a partner who supports your dreams, and now you're starting a family. That's everything I ever wanted for you, even if it took me a while to understand what that looked like. Do you still worry about my safety?" "Every day. But I also trust your judgment and your training in ways I didn't understand before. You've proven that you can handle whatever challenges your career presents, and you've found someone who can handle them with you." Looking back now, I realize that was the moment everything finally came full circle. Dad's words weren't just about accepting my career choices. They were about recognizing that I'd found my place in the world and someone who belonged there with me. Ryan had seen my potential when my own family couldn't understand it. My family had learned to trust my judgment even when my choices scared them. And I discovered that being called a loser by the people you love sometimes just means they're worried about you choosing a path they can't imagine walking themselves. The FBI agent who hired me became the man who married me. The father who thought I was wasting my potential became my biggest supporter. The career that seemed like rebellion became a calling that saved lives and changed policies. Sometimes the best love stories aren't about people who fit together perfectly from the beginning. Sometimes they're about people who choose to grow together, to support each other's dreams even when those dreams are complicated, and to build something stronger than either could create alone. Dad was wrong about me being a disappointment, but he was absolutely right about one thing. I needed someone who could see my potential clearly enough to help me believe in it myself. Ryan turned out to be that someone, and our story turned out to be exactly what it was supposed to be. The end.